You use fairly advanced statistical models to make your decisions, and what I'm wondering is, are there good metrics for individual defense? Because right now people use plus minus, defensive plus minus, and they also use the synergy points per possession for defensive plays. And I've noticed that the two metrics don't have much to say to each other. So, are we anywhere close to figuring that out? Do you have that personally figured out? Where are we with that?
I don't think you could ever figure it out. I think looking at the individual synergy stats for what they are is what they are. If you want to know which player is a good post defender, you can look and use synergy to video and watch their video for the post. But looking at like a person's, I think stats, individual stats on how they defend their individual player is like maybe 10% or less of defense. Defense isn't about stopping your own player. That's not what defense is about. Because a lot of times you're never really matched up with your player anyways. A lot of times you're supposed to switch and you don't. A lot of times you're supposed to influence your player to the baseline and move them over to another player. And some players, I mean, if you don't do that, and that's not really recorded in any of the data, I think the I don't know what the other thing you talked about was plus minus or something like that. I think there
Yeah.
is a good defensive system in terms of there is a way to capture defense, what's going on. I just haven't seen it in the public domain at all. When I first saw Synergy, I was like, oh, Synergy's cool, but they don't have any defensive data, because for a while they didn't have any defensive data. And I was like, Synergy sucks. They don't have defensive data. And then now they have defensive data, and I'm like, it sucks even more because everyone's looking at this defensive data and thinking it's like, oh my God, look how great a defender this guy is on his guy, when that's not really what defense is about. Defense isn't about stopping your individual matchup. Defense is about
Yeah.
playing within a unit and making sure that you're taking away certain things
No, I
from
totally agree
from a
with you
specific
there.
team standpoint.
Yeah, it's getting over applied that way. It's just you can't compartmentalize defense and say it's about one person, one matchup, because oftentimes somebody will screw up on their matchup or screw up on the rotation, and that's not where the points come from. The points come from the ball getting rotated
Exactly.
around after the defense
Right.
has been compromised. Um, I want to know about
Right. A
plus
lot of times
minus
players are
though.
supposed to influence. Go
Oh,
ahead.
oh,
Go
go
ahead. No, I'm
on.
sorry.
Oh,
No,
okay.
no, I'm fine. Go ahead with the plus minus.
Cool. With plus minus, I feel like it's a controversial stat. We all know that it's a somewhat flawed stat. Yesterday, when I was covering the Warriors, for whatever reason, Mark Jackson brought it up, apropos of nothing, that he didn't believe in it, but at the same time, Epe Udo had a very good plus minus, and that meant something. So I just want to know, how do you feel about
Yeah.
that stat in general? How much utility does it have?
I mean, it tells a little bit of a story. You can look at it and see, but a lot of it's random. I mean, you have to really account for who's on the court, what the game situation was when that player was on the court. So I don't think it's that valuable. I think, not to not answer your question and answer a different question, but I think like you talked about Mark Jackson. I think that's like a good example of like how a little bit of statistical knowledge is like a bad thing, kind of like the synergy stuff. Because here's a guy who's clearly spent his time not coaching or preparing to be a coach, trying to like take all this data and different ways of doing, coaching basketball and applying it to a game. And he's just doing it wrong a lot of times. Like, I don't know if there's like a game where they were fouling Dwight Howard every single time. And John Hollinger wrote about it, and I tweeted about it as soon as it happened. I mean, they were fouling Dwight Howard every single time. And then when it came a time when they were really supposed to foul him, when there was like a differential in the shot, where there was like 24 seconds left in the quarter, and had they fouled him then, they would have got the ball back and had an extra possession on offense. That would have been the time to foul. And then there, he just didn't foul. So it's just like, that's kind of an example of, I mean, it's completely different from what you talk about, probably because I'm just evading the question, because I don't want to talk about what I specifically do on defense and what I think is the right way to do things, because it's just not
More than okay.
But yeah, but no, the idea being that a little bit of knowledge, whether it be defensive plus minus, whether it be synergy post stats or whatever stats, I think a little bit of statistical knowledge can be a bad thing if taken the wrong way. And a lot of these coaches and writers and people who are talking about stuff kind of get that a little bit. There's really good defensive coaches, and there's ones that aren't nearly as good, but like great defensive coaches like Tom Thibodeau, I'm sure he's not looking at defensive plus minus numbers to figure out who's a good defender. I think he's looking at which players are buying into the specific system that he's installed, and which players are carrying out their tasks and guarding their players in the way they're supposed to be guarding them, not who's got a better plus minus stat over a course of one game, which is like an infinitesimal small sample.
Yeah, it's funny. It's the whole watch the game is often what ignorant people say to people who are trying to figure it out analytically. But it seems to be applicable, at least on the defensive end, that you generally learn more by watching than you might by parsing the data. You have
Right.
interesting ideas and sometimes contrarian ideas. And I believe that you've said that we shouldn't have charges in the NBA. I just want you to elaborate on that and why you think that should perhaps happen.
I think so. Just to be clear, I think you can still draw an offensive foul. I don't want to do away with offensive fouls completely, but I think the idea that you're defending your man, and then now this guy gets past his defender, and another guy comes running in and draws a charge, like the block charge. I just think that's not really good basketball. It's really bad when a guy's not even doing anything, but he's passed the ball, and now he continues to go forward and runs into someone, and now that's a charge. I think that's just like, I mean, it's like the only sport in the world where you can just get in front of someone and stop, and then the person who hits you is penalized. I mean, if you're driving down the street and the guy cuts in front of you and hammers on the brakes and you smash into him, you're going to be like, oh, who's at fault there? The person who rear ends him at fault, but that's like a driving accident. It's not a basketball game. And basketball's kind of like they've taken the rules of traffic and applied them to a game. Like, oh yeah, if you run in front of me and hammer on the brakes and stop and you rear end me, yeah, you're at fault, just like when you're driving a car. And I think that the basketball game itself right now is the court's so compressed with these players. They're so big. It's small. There's not much room to maneuver to begin with. They've allowed zone, which they thought was going to increase scoring. If you go back to when they first allowed zone in 2000 and whatever, the theory was, oh my God, it's going to increase scoring. And the person who thought about that was a complete moron. So now you have these teams playing all these really, really sophisticated defenses where no one's really guarding anyone but space. And then on top of that, if you do get to an open area, someone like Shane Battier can come sliding right in and plant his feet, and now you've gotten a charge. And it just takes away the excitement for the game. The thing about basketball players is they're so athletic. It's almost like ballet combined with sports. They're just the most gifted athletes around, with the exception of maybe a few other sports. And you're just taking away from some of the beauty of the game by having these guys running all over the court, jumping in front of each other to draw charges. And I don't think anyone is like, oh my God, what an exciting play. Did you see that? How exciting was that? Like when LeBron James chases a guy down and blocks the shot and actually tries to play defense, that's exciting. But like running in front of a guy, hammering on the brakes, stopping, and having him run into you, and then wondering if it's a block or charge, looking down to see if his feet were here or his feet were there, I just think it just ruins the flow of the game. And I don't understand why it is the way it is. I don't know why anyone watching the game of basketball thinks that that's exciting to watch. So that's just kind of my theory.
I'm in favor of anything that makes Derek Fisher's career more difficult or gets him out of the league, frankly. So go. I think I'm right. In favor of that reform. Thanks so much for stopping by. Very informative questions. Very interesting ideas. Yeah. Thanks so much. Come back anytime.
Yeah, it's a cool thing. I never know you guys had this, but it's pretty interesting. I like it a lot. Thanks a lot, guys.